Hello, everybody. My name is Ruchir Shah. I'm the Director of External Affairs at the Scottish Wildlife Trust. And I would just like to run through some key information before handing over to Karen to officially open this year's National Members Day. Most importantly, I need to remind you all that this event is being recorded. All participant cameras are off, as this is a webinar. However, do be aware if you ask a question that your voice will appear on the recording. When it comes to our wildlife question time, if you have a question for the panel, please use the question and answer function at the bottom of your screens. It might be at the top of your screen as well. Please check. Please do feel free to use the chat function for any comments as well. This will be monitored throughout the event. Members will hear more from me later regarding these special interest sessions, but for now, I will hand over to Karen to officially open the event, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Ruchir. Hello, everyone, who I can't see, but I guess you're all out there. And a very warm welcome from me and this basking shark to the Scottish Wildlife Trust National Members Day 2020. I'm Karen Chambers, Council Vice Chair for Local Groups and Watch, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. National Members Day is our chance to celebrate all of you, our members, but I'd also like to welcome any guests who are also participating in this event. It's been a very strange and challenging year for all of us, so it's great to be able to be here with you all today, despite the circumstances, to celebrate the work of the Scottish Wildlife Trust and to thank you all as members for your wonderful support over the last 12 months. This is the first time, obviously, that we've run our National Members Day completely online, and it's fantastic that we're still able to get together in this way. As you can see, we have an excellent programme lined up for you. Jo Pike, our CEO, is going to start the afternoon with a presentation on what the future holds for the Trust. She'll be followed by our keynote speaker, who I'm particularly looking forward to, wildlife photographer Charlie Phillips. We'll then take a quick break before our ever-popular wildlife question time. This will be chaired by our Vice Chair for Conservation, Dr. Kenny Taylor. We have some questions which have already been submitted, but we'll also be taking questions from the audience, and all our speakers will be on the panel. Finally, I'll have the enormous pleasure of announcing the winners of our Trustees Awards for volunteering. This will bring the public section of the National Members Day to a close, and we do hope that those of you who are guests here today will enjoy the day and might think about becoming members in the future. Our already registered members will then have the opportunity of joining one or more of 3 special interest groups. These were first introduced in the 2018 Members Day and have become extremely popular. If you're eligible, you should have received joining instructions. Before I hand over to Jo, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all of you out there for being here with us today. These are new and uncertain times for us, and it's very powerful that we're all able to come together in this way. Do use the function comment on what the speakers are saying and the Q&A function to ask questions. We can't promise to answer every question, but please do engage as much as you can. Now, I'm very pleased to hand over to our Chief Executive, Jo Pike, who is going to give us an idea of what the coming year has in store for the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Jo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm delighted to be with you all here today and really looking forward to this special edition of National Members Day. As Karen said, it's always nice to be with members, even if we can't see you, it's nice to know that you're there. So what does the future hold? Well, in the next few minutes, I'm going to say a few words about that before handing over to our star speaker, Charlie Phillips, who I'm also really looking forward to hearing. So on a global scale, the World Economic Forum has recently started talking about the Great Reset. And you'll know that the World Economic Forum brings together the world's greatest thinkers and world leaders to look ahead to the future. And when this initiative was launched quite recently by Prince Charles, who's of course also our patron, he pointed out that we've never had an opportunity like this before, and we'll never have it again. The pandemic has turned lives upside down, but of course, climate change and biodiversity loss both have the potential to do so much more harm. And that's why it's so urgent that we reset our relationship with the natural world. Fortunately, the United Nations had already designated the coming decade from 2021 to 2030 as the decade of ecosystem restoration. So maybe at last we will have a chance to give nature the attention it deserves, and not just the attention, but also the protection, the investment, and the political will to help it recover. In Scotland, there's been much discussion of how the recovery from the pandemic can be a green one. And looking ahead at the next 12 months, there'll be some important opportunities to focus on how helping nature can provide solutions to some of our biggest challenges while improving our well-being and making us more resilient. An update to the climate change plan is due shortly, along with the publication of the infrastructure investment plan, in which we'd like to see a strong focus on natural infrastructure, such as peatlands, woodlands, and green spaces. But there's also going to be an election in Scotland next year, of course. And I have a question for all of you, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on. So do please share them in the chat if you'd like to. The question is this: how do we in Scotland get voters to make nature a priority in the run-up to the elections next May? I'll leave you to ponder on that one. So in terms of what the Trust will be doing to help nature get the attention it deserves, we'll be working very hard to persuade all of the political parties to get nature's recovery into their manifestos. Some of you, I hope, will have seen that last week we published our Nature Recovery Plan in partnership with WWF and RSPB Scotland. In it, we set out 11 steps that can be taken now for nature, and you can find the publication on our website. Another important project that we're continuing to work on is Oceans of Value. Now, Scotland's marine area is vast, making up approximately 60% of UK seas and covering an area that's incredibly 6 times as large as Scotland's land. Our coasts and waters support a huge array of spectacular wildlife and natural habitats, but unfortunately the constant pressure and demands from modern society have led to a decline in the health of Scotland's seas. Our Oceans of Value project is investigating 2 different approaches to valuing the marine environment in Orkney. On the one hand, by gathering the views of local people using a technique called the community voice method, and on the other, by looking at the economic and social benefits using a natural capital assessment, which we'll be commissioning in the near future. We'll then compare results from these 2 methods and draw up a set of recommendations to assist marine planners with decision making. Another thing that we're going to be working on over the coming months is developing ideas from our route map to £1 billion, which we published in May in partnership with SEPA, and that's covered in one of the special interest sessions later. However, it's obviously vital that at the same time as trying to change things at a policy level, that we're actively making a difference on the ground, not only across our suite of well over 100 wildlife reserves, but also beyond. We have to be the change that we want to see. So one of the things we'll be doing in the next year is developing our Irvine to Girvan nectar network, which aims to establish an interconnected network of flower-rich habitats along the Ayrshire coast, within which pollinating insects can spread and thrive. And many of you will be well aware that pollinators are in trouble, which is not good news. Over 80% of Europe's crops depend on pollinators, but over 95% of the UK's wildflower meadows have been lost since the Second World War, meaning that places where pollinating insects can thrive are now very restricted. The Nectar Network came about through a group of Ayrshire businesses, golf clubs and their neighbours who were already exploring sustainability together and decided to take action to help pollinators. There are 35 sites currently managed under the Nectar Network banner, and there are also many others in between that are already providing good habitat. So the idea is to keep adding more so that the distance between the good ones shrinks, making it easier for pollinators to travel across the landscape. Now, realistically, it will take many years to fully populate this 50-kilometre by 5-kilometre coastal strip with enough pollinator hotspots, and the scale of the task can seem daunting. But this has seen genuine commitment, enthusiasm and buy-in from so many different kinds of people, and we're very confident that it will continue to move forward. And it's also worth noting that a quarter of the UK's 200 bee species can be found on the Ayrshire coast. Meanwhile, up in the northwest, as part of our Coahuilc living landscape, we'll be continuing to expand our tree nursery. And as some of you will know, the Little Assynt Tree Nursery has an ultimate goal of growing 100,000 trees a year, providing quality local jobs while supporting local conservation projects. They grow trees and shrubs of local provenance to be used in native woodland schemes on both the Coahuilc and Assynt Living Landscape Partner Ground and elsewhere in the Northwest Highlands. Grown from seed collected in the locality, the trees are ideally suited to the climate and soil conditions of the area and provide an enhanced level of biosecurity to planting schemes. Species under cultivation include oak, birch, rowan, hazel, Scots pine, juniper, and more. Now, this is obviously only a tiny fraction of what you as members are helping the Trust to do for wildlife across Scotland. And there are so many other exciting things on the horizon, including reaching out to new audiences, building on the brilliant work of our young leaders, and so much more. We need to scale up our impact and play our part in delivering transformative change. Through ecological restoration at a landscape scale, through high impact advocacy for nature, and by finding a role for everyone to be a part of the solution. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Everyone, a conservationist. So I'd like to close here simply by thanking you all very much for joining us today, and I very much hope that you enjoy the rest of this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. A huge challenge ahead for all of us, but we do have a roadmap with the 11 steps, and I think this is what people need. I'd just like to take this opportunity while I'm here to say what a sterling job Jo has been doing over the last months in very difficult situations, in both holding the Trust together and continuing to further its many projects in her inimitable, cheerful manner. Thank you, Jo. Next, I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker for this afternoon, appropriately selected for this, the Heir of Coasts and Waters. He is Charlie Phillips, award-winning wildlife photographer and dolphin behavioural expert, well known for his stunning portraits of Scotland's bottlenose dolphins. He's also a field officer for whale and dolphin conservation. Over to you, Charlie, and we're really looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Let me just get my, there we go, share screen. I think that should be us. There we go. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's delightful to be with you all. I'm always very keen to get involved in events like this, and it's something that we're going to have to get more and more used to, I think. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Charlie Phillips. I'm the field officer for the marine charity Whale and Dolphin Conservation. I've also been a professional wildlife photographer for about 25 years, and every now and again you'll find me at SWT events and meetings. I've done some fundraisers in the past. We have quite a, oh, hang on a minute, what we got here, come on. I'm not seeing my, hang on a minute, can I just stop sharing for a second? Right. For some reason, I'm not able to. Sure. Okay, Rook here. Have we got any help here? There's something going on.
What's the problem you're having at your end, Charlie? I have to say, by the way, it wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if we didn't have issues like this. I think every single Zoom meeting I've been on has had some moment like this.
I haven't. I'm not able to see my slides being actually forwarding. Hang on.
So we can see one of your slides clearly.
Yeah, that's the opening. Yeah, the opening one.
And it's not moving forward.
Right. Okay. Let me try another one. Ah, that's
Perfect.
better.
Yeah.
That's better. That'll do it. Yes, I've had a lovely relationship with Scottish Wildlife Trust over the years, knowing many of you, like Dr. Taylor there. We've got a very good relationship with SWT at our Scottish Dolphin Centre, because the building, the old fishing station, it's on the reserve, and so we always love liaising with you guys. It's great. As you can see in this picture here, my main job really is all about dolphins and bottlenose dolphins that we have around the coast. And just in the background there, you can actually see the old salmon station with the old ice house with the green grass on the roof. It's a lovely reserve. It's a place where I love to spend time. This year's been really strange, and I've not actually been to Spey Bay this year. Because the National Scottish Dolphin Centre is closed, apart from the cafe that's only open for teas and coffees just now. So I really miss it. It's a wonderful place. It's beautifully looked after by SWT. My main job with the charity, Whale and Dolphin Conservation, is about Adopt a Dolphin. I'm in charge of this project where the public can support the charity by adopting an actual dolphin that lives and breathes and frolics and eats salmon up here in the Moray Firth. The Adopt a Dolphin project's been going for quite a long time, and I took over the running of it really from Aberdeen University, who were supplying a lot of the information and photographs for many years, and I still liaise with them. We're on the best of terms. We're having a very, very strange year again this year. Last year was a weird year for bottlenose dolphin movements, and I'll talk about that in a little while. The dolphins that I'm talking about are bottlenose dolphins, and we're very fortunate in the northeast of Scotland and the Moray Firth to have resident Tursiops truncatus bottlenose dolphins. They're lovely, big, chunky, ebullient creatures. They're fascinating to watch. I've been doing this for 25 years, and every day that I see a dolphin, my heart beats just that little bit quicker. And some days, especially in the winter, it can be a bit challenging. During the summer, when it's nice, warm, sunny weather and there's dolphins 20 feet in front of you, then life doesn't really get much better than that. We can see dolphins up and down the coastline now, all the way from Wick in the north, right down to the Flamborough Head Bird Observatory in the Yorkshire coast. And we know that the dolphins are beginning to expand their home range now. We haven't known so much about this really up until about 5-6 years ago, when, believe it or not, social media became quite a useful tool to be able to get members of the public to report sightings of whales and dolphins from all around the coastline. And it's amazing which individual dolphins have been turning up in certain areas. But I get many people coming to join me down on the beach, especially at Chanonry Point, which I laughingly call my office, to hopefully get pictures like what you're seeing now. These dynamic shots, people love seeing dolphins being very active. They're not always like that. Dolphins can have quiet periods, but everybody wants to see jumping dolphins. Now, this is what I call my office. This is the end of Chanonry Ness. It's a peninsula that juts out about a mile into the sea from the Black Isle town of Fortrose. And this is the lighthouse. And these people on the beach there are actually quite lucky. They're standing there at high tide, and they've got some dolphins going scooting past. But the secret to seeing dolphins from land in this location really is rising tide. And here you've got a battery of people standing with dolphins maybe only 20 or 30 feet away from them. What the dolphins are doing, the dolphins have learned over the years that this is an area where the tidal conditions make it easier for them to catch food. The tide is almost like this big supermarket conveyor belt coming in twice a day. The tide also goes out twice a day, and we do sometimes get dolphins foraging on falling tides, but statistics and just observations over the years, really the rising tide's the best time to see them, especially from land. Boat sightings are different. The boats are moving around, but really for land sightings, rising tides in areas like Channery Point are quite important. Funnily enough, from Spey Bay, the tides don't really make an awful lot of difference. We don't seem to have any correlation between tidal conditions and dolphin sightings. This is what people are coming to see, really, and what I like to do sometimes, if any of you have been at Channery Point, I like to stand back up the shingle rise rather than be right down with the people at the very front of the water, especially nowadays where you've got to socially distance. And this is actually shooting literally through the people. And you can see one of the dolphins here saying hello and giving the dolphin watchers their money's worth. This young dolphin is actually my namesake. I had the great honour of having a bottlenose dolphin named after me by Aberdeen University. They colluded with my wife and my colleagues. This young dolphin, ID 1025, his name's Charlie, and he's the son of Keslet, and Keslet was one of our adoption dolphins. She's gone wandering off. We have some dolphins that have headed to pastures new, we think. But I've studied him, I've studied his mother, and I've studied his grandmother as well. Kess, his grandmother, was a famous old dolphin that used to inhabit the Keswick Channel many, many years ago when I ran the Dolphin and Seal Centre at North Keswick. And she was a wonderful dolphin. She had spinal deformity called scoliosis, and it was amazing to watch her moving around with this disability, and she could catch salmon and jump out the water as good as anybody. And it was a fascinating study of disability in a wild animal. And young Charlie is a bit of a buffoon, to be quite honest. He charges around creating havoc. Well, typical young boy, really. But he'll be 13 this year, and it's interesting watching him growing up. Now, a lot of the dolphins, as I say, come to this pinch point that we quite often call Channery Point, because it's the land masses are narrowing down and creating these tremendous tidal vortexes. And this is why they come here, especially during the spring and the summer. The dolphins are after migratory salmon. And this is my Hello Mr. Fishy photograph. You can see the salmon with a slightly shocked look in its face as the bottlenose dolphin is opening its mouth. The fish in this shot is actually already dead. The dolphin has already killed it. Dolphins will quite often manipulate their food, especially when they start to come on to some of the larger salmon. The fish can be anything up to 15 to 20 pounds in weight. And for a dolphin to process that, the bulk of that fish has got to be comfortably down the throat so that the dolphin can actually physically swallow it. And it sometimes takes the dolphin quite a while to get this big mass, a big slippy mass of fish correctly down the throat so that it doesn't jam. I've seen some dolphins taking enormous salmon and taking the best part of an hour to try and process them. And people are amazed. They think that the dolphins are always playing with their food. Well, they're not really. They're actually manipulating it. They're not really playing with it. Occasionally, you will get one dolphin will actually throw the salmon around in a sort of like victory, victory celebration. But most of the time, they're actually making sure that the salmon is going down the throat head first, which is the best way and the easy way, so that the fins and the gills don't get jammed in the throat. Occasionally, dolphins will actually break the fish if they hit it too hard. And more often than not, the dolphin will possibly just discard that fish and move on to one that is still 100%. You don't want bits of bone getting stuck in your throat. Here we go again. Fish with a very surprised look in its face. The numbers of salmon being caught by the dolphins in the last year or two has gone down and down and down. Last year especially was really bad. It was the quietest year I can ever remember. And I think the records of salmon being caught in rivers can substantiate this. This year's been marginally better. I've seen more interaction between dolphins and salmon. And I think the reports from the likes of the River Tay and the River Ness, we've actually got slightly more salmon returning this year, which is good news. Now, not all the dolphins start off catching big fish. When the dolphins are quite young, they'll practice on smaller stuff. After the babies have been weaned, they actively get encouraged to catch their own small food. And this young dolphin here, he's called Indigo, his mother's called Rainbow. He loves big sand eels. He treats them like fishy spaghetti, and he loves guzzling these down. He's starting to catch salmon of his own now, but this is one of his favourite target species, is big fat sand eels. You only realise how big these sand eels are when you actually see a tern trying to catch one and fly away with it. The tern would need turbocharged to actually take the sand eels of this size back to the nest. Salmon, of course, are a seasonal fish, and the dolphins tend to eat what's seasonally available around the coastline. And in this case, this dolphin is actually mouthing a mackerel, and we're coming into mackerel season about now. The sightings of dolphins around the likes of Chanonry Point are beginning to dwindle slightly, but we are seeing groups of dolphins coming whizzing past, and they tend to be associated with seabirds like gannets. We had quite a few gannets right on top of dolphins yesterday between Chanonry Point and the Keswick Bridge at Inverness. And it was wonderful to see. It actually makes quite a sight when you see those beautiful seabirds actually watching what the dolphins are doing, and possibly vice versa. My job isn't always standing there in bright sunshine and lovely warm conditions. Quite often I'll be down even when the weather's a little bit grey and inclement. And in this case, this is my young namesake Charlie with a salmon in the pouring rain. Every now and again the heavens just open, and it can happen in the matter of minutes. As Kenny Taylor well knows, the peninsula is quite an exposed place to be, and within minutes you can be absolutely soaked to the skin. It's nice to get involved in some science now and again. And the relationship that I have with Aberdeen University has been a long-standing one. And occasionally I get asked to provide data or photographs, maybe for a project that's ongoing. And this is a nice one that we've got at the moment. This summer we had a series of what they call lander units, actually sunk and anchored to the seabed round about Chanonry Point. And there were acoustic studies done, and the recordings that these acoustic units were actually taking in and storing, the times that these landers were actually trying to record stuff was actually coinciding with the camera, my camera times. So they could actually work out, if I supplied the pictures and the data, they could find out what sounds were correlating to what images that I was providing. So once it's worked out, it'll be actually quite fascinating, because we won't just be able to tell boat categories apart, but we might actually be able to get down to the stage where we can tell dolphins apart as well. We know that dolphins do have individual signature whistles, but to be able to do it actually in the Moray Firth, I think will be absolutely remarkable, and I look forward to the results. This is a picture that I took from Chanonry of some of the Lighthouse Field Station staff going past in their small rib. And the dolphins are so used to the Lighthouse Field Station boat being so careful when it's out doing the photo ID studies that they won't leave it alone. It's a lovely thing to have dolphins right beside you, but sometimes they can be too close to the boat to try and get decent pictures of the dorsal fins. And this is me out to play one day with some of the scientists. It's lovely to be invited along as second photographer. Dr. Barbara Cheney is the principal photographer, and she's in charge of the photo ID project. And that's where some of my work actually gets dovetailed into, because I'll sometimes see dolphins that they don't, and some of my photo ID pictures are used in the main catalogue. It's a lovely day, really, being out on a survey, especially if the weather's nice. We tend not to go out in rough, lumpy seas. It tends to be fairly smooth. And so you can spend anything up to maybe 10, 11 hours out at sea. It's pretty hard work, you know? A dirty job, but somebody's got to do it, as some people would say. But after you come back, you know, I mean, I'll quite easily come back with 3,000 or 4,000 photographs to try and look through. So that's the next day taken care of. And while we're out there, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get pictures of the dorsal fin of the dolphin, because just like a human passport photograph, this is how we identify them. All the nicks and scratches and marks that you can see on that dorsal fin are actually caused by other dolphins. They sometimes interact quite violently with each other, and the dolphin's teeth are all the same size and shape, and they create these linear scratches. We call them rake marks. And sometimes if you can see up the back edge of the fin there are actually chunks of tissue missing. This is a absolutely foolproof way of identifying this dolphin. This is a young male animal that we call Legion, and he's lovely. He's a very active animal, and he dots about quite a bit. I saw him a couple of days ago, actually. And this is a couple of extracts from Aberdeen University's ID catalogue, and you can see Legion, the photographs on the left there, ID 1042, and then Mischief, ID 1023. He's one of our adoption dolphins that, because of the power that this technique of photo ID has, we could tell that this was the same animal that's actually just been photographed off the coast of Denmark in the middle of this month, middle of August, sorry. So ID 23, Mischief. And you can see the differences in the dorsal fins. They're absolutely unique. They're like human faces. They're completely different. And the more time you spend with them, the finer detail you begin to pick up on. This is an extract from Barbara Cheney's blog on the Lighthouse Field Station website, and it shows you a map of Scotland and how unusual 2019 was. We started off in March 2019 with some dolphins up in the Pentland Firth that we recognised very well from down in towards Inverness. And then suddenly we lost track of some of these. And in May 2019, we ended up with the young sunburned dolphin called Spurtle being seen off the east coast of Ireland. And then a bit later, her and the rest of her family were actually seen round on the west coast, and they spent the whole summer there. Shortly after that, we had a report coming in from the coast of Holland that some bottlenose dolphins were seen, and it was ID 23 Mischief who was there with about 10, maybe 15 other dolphins, but we could only identify about 8. And then this year, 18th of August, I think it was, we had some indications from Denmark that they were seeing a group of dolphins off the west coast, and it was the same ones that were in Holland. So it's quite amazing how these dolphins are beginning to move around. And we're not quite sure why they're doing this. We don't know whether it's maybe just for food, or maybe there's a genetic need. Maybe the dolphins are having to freshen up their DNA a little bit. This is me out at sea, a happy man. A little bit of a rainbow in the background, as you can see there. I don't often get my photograph taken, and God, I'm looking old these days. But sometimes being out on the wildlife tour boats can be quite advantageous, because you do get some good interactions with dolphins. We have a good relationship with the boat operators up in our area, and they're all very well behaved, and they all love the dolphins. And this symbiotic relationship that we have with them can be quite advantageous, because I quite often get invited on board and and don't have to pay for the ticket as well. This is a young dolphin, and we're just at the mouth of the Cromarty Firth here. You can see some of the rigs that are in for repair and maintenance in the background. And as I say, it's nice to get a different perspective on what the dolphins are doing. You do get some very close interactions with them. Sometimes the dolphins will be away in the distance, and no matter how big a telephoto lens you've got, you'll just not get any pictures. Sometimes the dolphins are so close you can hardly focus. A terrible habit. It's a terrible complaint to have. Here's a young calf actually coming up to say hello to us. This is on a beautiful day out on a survey with the staff from the lighthouse. And you can actually see just underneath the pectoral fin of that young dolphin is actually the dolphin's mother coming up alongside. You can just see that little shape there. These photos are lovely, but to get all the conditions coming together all at the one time to get this done is, you only get this every now and again. Some days you wonder whether it's the Moray Firth you're in or whether it's Mauritius. One of the young calves comes speeding towards us. If you get the light and the angle just right, you can get some lovely expressions on the dolphins' faces. Even though the dolphins can't really move their faces around, they don't actually have facial muscles as such, but you really do think they're smiling when they come surfing through the waves. Some of these dolphins are climbing up the social ladder, if you like, and these two dolphins here are actually part of a group that I call the Bad Boys Club. These are some of the adult male and sub-adult males who are working their way through the ranks, and they tend to be trying to outperform each other, and they're amazing dolphins to watch. They're so powerful and so fast. Sometimes they're a little bit aggressive, but every now and again they just go for it, and it's sheer play, and it's wonderful to watch. We occasionally get targeted by these dolphins, and they come over to the rib if we're out on it, and they will deliberately splash us. We do know that they interact with us every now and again, and I think they know what cameras are. I think they absolutely know what cameras are, and they will try and get at the most awkward angle and actually try and soak us. It's happened before. Every now and again, if you're actually stopped and actually trying to maybe take a waypoint and see where the dolphins are actually going, every now and again they'll surprise you. And on this particular trip, we thought that these two dolphins were actually coming in the boat beside us. It's a different perspective, as I say. Being out at sea, you can get an idea roughly of what the dolphins' home range is like. And the Moray Firth itself is such a diverse place. You've got a mixture of hard and soft coastlines. You've got areas of deep water, but you've also got sandbanks as well. And this all has an effect on the way that the dolphins move around and the way that the dolphins behave. We're in the maternity month at the moment. September tends to be the month where we see most of the babies being born. We've got two already. ID 440 Sickle, she's got a new calf with her. And also ID 31 Rainbow, another one of our adoption dolphins, one of our lovely females. She just had a baby a few weeks ago. And they're tiny, they're absolutely tiny. They're these little trout popping up beside mum. And very soon they'll start to put on a little bit of weight with the very thick, rich milk that mum is producing for them. And they'll not be weaned until they're about 18 months or 2 years old. By that time, they'll be starting to catch tiny little fish for themselves. There's very few things on earth cuter than a baby dolphin. This youngster here is maybe only 2 or 3 days old. They're really small, but it's amazing just how quickly they grow. This is Rainbow with not her last calf, but her previous calf. And this young dolphin is now called Indigo. He's 8 years old. Now, this young calf, if you notice, the top and bottom jaw are exactly the same length. This is actually quite unusual for bottlenose dolphins, because bottlenose dolphins tend to have top jaws that are slightly shorter than the bottom ones. But this is a genetic trait that Indigo shares with his mum, because her jaws are exactly the same length as well. It's these little fine details every now and again that you notice, and it just separates one dolphin from another. This was Rainbow in a photograph only a couple of weeks ago. She's got her newborn right beside her, and she's busy. Talk about multitasking. She's busy trying to swallow a salmon, and she's got Junior right at her side. This is one of these joyous photographs where you've got a couple of different things going on at the same time. And I always love to be able to get pictures like these. Dolphins are creatures of mystery sometimes. You wonder why they do things. And every now and again, we'll see them actually playing with inanimate objects. They'll drape seaweed over themselves. They'll play with things that are floating about in the water. They'll maybe a branch of a tree that's floated out to sea. They'll actually play with that. And every now and again, you'll get some dolphins playing dress up with kelp. It's quite nice. But they can also use the kelp to actually throw around. This is young Spurtle. having a great game with this big bit of holdfast kelp. She was throwing it between her and one of her friends, and they kept this game up for about half an hour. And one of the big male dolphins came over to try and join in the game, and they wouldn't let him. They took the seaweed and swam away as quickly as they could, and continued the game further away. And anytime he approached them, they swam off, they ran away. It was brilliant to watch, and it was so funny because you could see exactly what was happening. Encountering dolphins out at sea is a wonderful thing, as long as you're careful about it and respect where they are and what they're doing. Always be a welcome guest in their world. And the code of conduct really is applicable to both commercial operators and private operators. We do occasionally get problems, but more often than not, people are just overjoyed to see dolphins, and especially like these guys here, if they actually come and interact with you. The lady on the yacht was shouting to us, you know, should we stop or just slow down? And we told them to just carry on the way that we're going and don't deviate right or left, and don't speed up or slow down. Just keep going, and the dolphins will keep with you. It made their trip, apparently. We spoke to them later on. It was great. Dolphins can motor on. They really move at the speed that the youngest members of the pod can move at. So if they're babies in the group, then the dolphins will only move as quickly as the babies can without getting too tired. But it's amazing how quickly that a group of dolphins can actually move along at. They don't need to stop for very much at all. They'll travel on hour upon hour upon hour. And it's amazing to find that maybe a dolphin that I photographed in the morning at Chanonry Point might be along at Spey Bay later on that same afternoon. It's amazing the speed that they can just vanish at as well. Every now and again, you'll have a group of dolphins right in front of you, and they will just vanish as though by magic. And then they're hundreds and hundreds of meters away. Every so often you'll get interactions near Chanonry Point. It's quite a hot spot, really. Also, you know, being the hot spot for dolphins, it's also quite a hot spot for people going out in kayaks and, you know, not so much jet skis these days, but pleasure boats. But this young couple in the double kayak here had a great encounter. They had dolphins actually coming over to say hello to them, and they got such a surprise that they actually pulled the kayak right into the beach. And they came running up and said, you know, oh my goodness, there's dolphins. Wow, that's amazing. I said, yeah, they're actually hunting here. Oh, we'll come in then. We'll actually just pull the kayak in and not disturb them. And it was lovely to see that sort of commitment to the welfare of the dolphins. And I think the girl actually adopted a dolphin later on, which was nice. From the sublime to the ridiculous, we do year upon year get loads and loads of big cruise ships coming into the Cromarty Firth. Not this year, of course. This year's a little bit different. The whole world's different this year, but you can see the difference in size. But the cruise ships nearly always get a welcoming committee. There's nearly always one or two dolphins on hand just at the mouth of the Cromarty Firth whenever these leviathans come in. And it's amazing to watch them sometimes bow riding with the boats as big as that. Every so often you get a scenario in front of you that's a bit more arty, and the dolphins a little bit further out into the distance. And I love the linear aspect of this picture. It's one of my favourites. It's one of the big male dolphins, and he has been underwater for quite a while, and that's him just surfacing to breathe. But he's travelling very quickly at the same time, and it would actually make a good jigsaw puzzle. This one, I think. At the other end of the scale, you get really close-up images like this, and this is my namesake, Charlie. This was taken out on one of the surveys, and he came right up to the boat and almost stuck his head over the side to see what we were doing. What a cheeky brat. But you can see some of the scratches on his face where he's been interacting with other young males, and they do get quite heavily scarred. it's one of these jobs where you occasionally bump into some nice people. Miranda Kristofnikov, she's also one of our patrons, and she'll quite often text me if her and Nick and the kids are coming up this way. It's always nice to see like-minded individuals, and likes of Miranda and Simon King and Chris Pack and these kind of guys. It's always nice to welcome them up. It's even better if I can actually get to show them dolphins right there and then. So it's one of these jobs that I've been doing for quite a long time, and I've noticed a few differences in not only people's attitudes. A lot of people are more environmentally aware these days, and aware of our impact that we're having on the seas and the coastlines. And this, being the year of coasts and waters, it's never really been more important to get the message across and to tell people that if we don't change our ways, then in a year or two we're not going to see sites like this. It brings it home to them, and hopefully the message gets through. And I mean, I think we're all really singing from the same hymn sheet here. And if we just keep the message going and just keep turning the volume up now and again, then I think it will eventually get through. I'm quite optimistic for the future. I think we've got quite a bright future, especially in Scotland. I think we've got a good attitude. I think we've got a pretty good government that listens to us. And if we just keep the message and keep it just on, just keep that message going, then I think we'll actually eventually win in the end. It feels like an uphill struggle all the time, but every so often you get good results. If only all days were like this. Flat calm sea, blue sky, dolphins leaping about. Yeah, it would be great, wouldn't it? Now, I realise I'm looking at the clock here and we're coming up to about 10 to 1, so I'm not going to harp on too much longer. I'll maybe leave 5 minutes or so for some questions. But this is my trigger photograph. This is my sunset photograph, so it's nearly time to get off the stage. I'd just like to thank SWT for inviting me along, and I look forward to the rest of the webinar and the question and answer session. So, for me up here in the Moray Firth in Inverness at the moment, just one last plug really. I brought a book out a few years ago called On a Rising Tide, and it's about the bottlenose dolphins. You'll find it in some bookshops. And one of the fundraisers that I did for SWT a few years ago down in Perthshire, actually, it was a lovely little event run by or organised by Jonathan Pinnock, dear Jonathan. And we were in the Burnham Arts Centre, and with a good audience, and thankfully the audience bought quite a lot of these books as well. So there you go, On a Rising Tide. It's all about the dolphins, and it's just full of funny stories. So thank you very much indeed, folks, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Sorry, thank you very much, Charlie. That was absolutely amazing. What stunning and joyous images. I think you've captured for us activities that we might have had spend hours standing in the cold and wet waiting for. So thank you very much for that. An inspiring insight. I should also say, Charlie has plugged his book. I was going to mention it, but don't forget it. And he also manages Adopt a Dolphin, and I'm going to adopt several after this talk, I think. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen.
Theoretically, we have a 5-minute comfort break due to end at 2:05. Should we start that sooner?
I don't know if we want to take some questions, Karen, for Charlie, and then have a bit of a break.
Yeah, okay. Charlie, open for questions.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Somebody, I think, came in on the chat. I'll just pick up before anybody else comes in, asking about anthropomorphizing animals, talking about their expressions and so on in a sort of human way. What's your take on that?
I've got onto the question and answer session here.
Oh, you found it. Okay.
Yeah. Giulio Biondi, my question is for Charlie. When did you realize you wanted to dedicate your life to studying and documenting bottlenose dolphins? Was there a specific serendipity moment? Not really, but I did get a great chance to get involved with looking and studying dolphins when I moved house in the late 1980s from Loch Lomond side up to the Moray Firth. And one of the first things I saw when I opened the cottage door that looked out on Cullen Bay was bottlenose dolphins leaping about. So that's one of these. Just lovely moments. Pete Haskell is asking, Charlie, in your view, is the level of protection provided by the Moray Firth Special Area of Conservation sufficient? How would the dolphin population differ without this legal protection? Well, the SAC legislation now really needs to be extended, because the dolphins have extended their home range. So things are happening, and the dolphins are spreading out. And we need to maybe reassess the coastal legislation that we have to actually extend all the way down, really now, all the way down to the South Yorkshire coast, where we know that where we actually know that a lot of our dolphins are actually seen on quite a regular basis. Anne Henderson, any evidence of wind farms in the Moray Firth disturbing the dolphins? Not really, no. We've had studies done by Aberdeen University, and they think that the impact is pretty minimal. Certainly where the wind farms are, we don't tend to get a great deal of bottlenose dolphins being out as far from the coast as that. Bottlenose dolphins tend to be a bit more coastal in their behaviour. It may disturb a few porpoises. Porpoises tend to move around in the areas where the wind farms are. But I think, personally, I think the impact is minimal. Juliana Sinclair, why was last year a particularly bad one for salmon? It's one of these very complicated stories. Salmon numbers have been declining dramatically over the years. The place where we have our Scottish Dolphin Centre at Spey Bay used to be a commercial salmon station, and I mean they used to take thousands and thousands of salmon out of that river every year, and it closed in the early 1990s because they realised that it wasn't commercially viable then. And now the numbers have got catastrophically bad, and there are urgent investigations into why this is happening. I was involved in doing a little bit of filming with the Atlantic Salmon Trust a few years ago, and the stories that were coming out there from some of the studies that were going on is that a real terrible kind of coming together of worst case scenarios, and the poor salmon just aren't standing a chance. Hopefully we can reverse the situation, but oof, it's pretty poor at the moment. I think this year, looking at various fishery like websites and Twitter accounts and things are slightly better this year. There seem to be more salmon on the go. I've certainly seen dolphins catching more salmon this year than last year. Anne Sinclair, how long can dolphins stay underwater? It depends really on what they're doing. Generally, dolphins will come to the surface every 30 seconds, every minute or so, if they're just traveling along. But if they're diving deeper, if they're maybe investigating something, bottlenose dolphins can quite easily stay underwater for 7-8 minutes, 10 minutes if necessary. But in these relatively shallow waters that we have around here, they don't really, they don't really need to stay down that long. Michelle Conroy, my 8-year-old son is wondering, how old were you when you started taking pictures? I was about 30, really. I wasn't that young. I started taking pictures of the dolphins because there really weren't that many dolphin pictures around. Most of them tended to be from Aberdeen University, and they were dorsal fin pictures. But actual action shots, from when I was working in the Dolphin and Seal Centre, I actually started taking photographs to show people because there were actually very few around. Stephen Ballard, question for Charlie: do cruise ships ever injure or disturb dolphins? Should this be a concern for the new Aberdeen cruise liner harbour? We don't have much, we really don't have much evidence of cruise ship strikes, not in this area. There have been in America, there have been ship strikes of whales. But as far as dolphins go, we have very little violent interaction between dolphins and boats in this area, really. I'm starting to get a wee bit flooded with questions now. Hang on a minute. Thank you, Charlie. Great talk from Maud. Thank you very much. Tom Palmer, why are dolphins spreading? We think it's possibly due to finding pastures new, possibly due to lack of food in some areas, but also maybe DNA. That's from Tom Palmer. Sarah and Hilary Duncan. P.S. I love getting certificate every year. Thank me for adopting Mischief. Any sign of my fellow Mischief yet? Yes, Sarah and Hilary is in Denmark. And Brackenridge. Right. Maud, I've been into amateur wildlife photography for years now. Any tips on getting them noticed online? Just keep doing what you're doing. They'll get noticed eventually. It's just time and patience. Right, I think that's probably me for now. That'll do me for now, I think.
Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. Thank you very much again, Charlie. That was a great set of questions as well. So we all have to be back at 2:05, correct? See you all then and enjoy the short break.
Okay.
Hello, welcome back everybody. Lots of comments coming in, that's wonderful. I'll now place you in the very capable hands of Dr. Kenny Taylor, who's going to chair our wildlife question time. We run this every year in association with players of People's Postcode Lottery. Kenny's been a member of council for 6 years and also serves as convener of Conservation Committee and chair of the North of Scotland Local Group. Kenny's a Black Isle-based writer, broadcaster and lecturer with a background in animal behaviour, ecology, wildlife surveys, conservation and the media, a man of many parts. Formerly the Scottish Wildlife Trust Northern Officer, he's played prominent roles in campaigns and debate about peatland afforestation, mountain development, the buyout of egg, GM crop trials and restoration of native woodlands and native species. Please welcome Dr. Kenny Taylor. Over to you, Kenny.
Thanks very much, Karen. And it's been really good fun so far being part of this event. Thanks again, actually, to Charlie for such an inspiring set of pictures and also his very knowledgeable comments about a creature that he's known for the last few decades. And I've had the privilege of hearing Charlie quite a few times now talking about his passion for bottlenose dolphins, and every time it's fresh because, as you'll have heard, Charlie just spends as much time as he can out with the creatures themselves, so it keeps moving forward. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to probably your next book, actually, because it's a few years since the one that's still available. But anyway, I just wanted to say, you know, in common with a lot of people, how much I appreciated hearing that and how much the science is moving on. It seems to be the principle for a lot of things that people look at in detail. It's not static, and I wasn't aware about these international movements, for example, so that's absolutely fascinating. On our panel today, as well as Charlie, Karen, who is chairing the whole event, Joe Pike, our Chief Executive, and Sarah Robinson, who's Director of Conservation. I in terms of questions that had come in already, I know I've seen one from Yvonne Keith, who is asking how many varieties of seahorse inhabit Scotland's seas, and are they endangered at present? I don't know, Sarah, do you know about seahorses? Or I'm afraid I'm very ignorant about Scotland's seahorses.
I know there's 2 different species of seahorse found around the whole of the British coastline, right from Shetland all the way down south. Mainly, I think, on the west of the country is where you're most likely to see them, though they are all the way around the British Isles. So one's called the spiny seahorse, and then there's another called the short-snouted seahorse. And both of them, I guess we don't know enough about them to determine whether they are threatened or not. The IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, they have a red list, which many of you may have heard about, and that categorises species according to how threatened they are. So at the moment, those 2 species are data deficient, but I don't think that means we can be complacent or perhaps think they're not under threat. It's probably best to take a precautionary approach and assume that, as with many species that are threatened because of things like habitat loss and pollution, and of course climate change, those 2 species are likely to be suffering or possibly in decline. But I know there's also a survey that happens and has happened, I think, since 1994. I think they've got quite a good long-term data set that they're trying to build a picture of what's happening with the seahorses around Britain. And so hopefully, as we learn more, we can better understand what might be happening and how we can support the species.
Out of interest, has anybody on the panel seen a seahorse in the wild as opposed to an aquarium? I certainly haven't.
No, I'd love to.
I know they seem amazing creatures, not least for their very, very, very strange lifestyles by the standards of quite a lot of other creatures. I mean, I think the males actually carry the young, at least in some species. So essentially pregnancy is a male affair, I think, in some seahorses, but I don't want to speak for the whole of seahorsedom that way. I'm noticing actually, while I'm going back to see some of the questions that were put in earlier, I noticed one, I don't know, I think that was asked earlier, with Sherry Bettison asking Charlie, why are there no bottlenose dolphins on the west coast? Is it due to the Gulf Stream making the water too warm, or less of their desired food less plentiful? I don't know if you want to come back to that, Charlie, about differences, at least between west coast and east coast.
Well, there are actually a small population of bottlenose dolphins on the west coast. You also have dolphins down off the west coast of Wales, the Cardigan Bay population, that's much the same size as the Moray Firth and northeast coast population. But yeah, actually west coast of Scotland, there's about 60, maybe 65 identified individuals over there. And they normally move around the Outer Hebrides. We've got a group that inhabit the Sound of Barra. There's maybe 15 or so in that small group, and then there's a group that seems to hang about Skye quite a lot, and then heading down towards Mull, there's bottlenoses down there that quite often go right into Tobermory. Quite often people are standing on Tobermory and they're watching bottlenoses leaping about. But this past couple of years, we've had sightings coming in from many places where dolphins really haven't been seen before. And we think it's just because there's maybe people watching more. We're actually getting more people watching. I had a really nice lad send me some pictures from the Solway Firth just recently. One of our adoption females called Moonlight has turned up off the coast of the Isle of Man. And the Solway Firth isn't really that far away from the Isle of Man. And we just wondered whether some of the bottlenose dolphins that he's been seeing in Kirkcudbright Bay in the Solway Firth were actually some of ours, but they're not. They must be from one of the other populations somewhere. So yeah, we do have bottlenoses on the west coast, and they are resident. We see the same dolphins again and again. You do get transient species like common dolphins that tend to be coming up and down, like to the Minch off the west coast. But down, further down the map towards Wales and the sort of southwest of England, you will see dolphins, and you'll actually see them quite regularly now.
And I remember a few years back when just gone into anchor at Tobermory Harbour, getting some pictures, not to your quality, Charlie, of a couple of bottlenoses that were, as you described, playing in the inner harbour. So I've got one with the Mishnish, other hostelries are available behind the dolphins. So it was like two icons of the Scottish coast in different ways, with the bottlenoses, of course, to the fore. But, that part of Tobermory is noted for a number of things. You just never know there. So because I've got the questions on my phone, I have to keep looking down to this. I should really, because Nick Wright has actually done a lot of work to make this whole event possible, as well as other staff have. But he's got a question for us, which is, does the panel think that the COVID-19 pandemic will force us to re-examine our relationship to the natural world? I don't know if Karen, you might have some thoughts on that to kick off.
I think we've probably all had a lot of thoughts on that, but I suspect the answer probably is yes. Because I think there are two issues. One is that for a lot of people, the natural world was David Attenborough and brightly coloured things on screens. And for many people, it's now become something that's right outside their back door, I think. And I think, strangely, this having to revert to online information and online everything has, to a certain extent, engaged people who might not have been engaged, either because they were young and thought wildlife wasn't that interesting, or because they were quite elderly and couldn't cope with it, but now they can. So there's a sort of hole in the middle, but I think things are developing there, and we have a stronger voice in a funny way.
Does anybody else want to make any observations on that as well? Certainly does seem to have changed a bit. Joe, do you want to?
I think there are a few interesting economic realities. I think it could go either way. I really agree with what Karen has said about the general public and the reconnection with nature. I think within government, there's been a lot of discussion about what the recovery looks like and what a green recovery looks like. And I think on the one hand, there is increasing pressure on the public purse to deal with the fallout from the from the pandemic, and that's forcing people to look at things differently. And I think that could be a good thing, because this is where we can present nature-based solutions, nature as a solution to problems, rather than just a problem that requires lots of money to be spent on it. And I think no time has that been more obvious. But clearly, these pressures on the public purse are also a threat to biodiversity if we don't get that message across loudly enough.
Absolutely.
Could I just add one thing into that? That one of the important things that's come through is the relationship between health and well-being and nature. And I just hope the government will pick that up a bit more strongly. And I think that's a thing that has been coming out very much through COVID, but hasn't been picked up adequately politically.
I think you're right there, Karen. I would say that one positive thing that we can build on, there's a strong hook in the discussions about a well-being economy, and the Scottish Government has been looking really closely at how we can move beyond traditional indicators like gross domestic product and think more holistically about what's of value in our lives. So I think if we can use those hooks, that's hopefully where we can bring more prominence to the health and well-being agenda, and preventing obesity, preventing mental health issues, preventing respiratory issues with better air quality and so on. It's massively important.
And in that context, Joe, if I could ask, Bruce Wilson's asked that with the Scottish Government's programme for government just being published very recently, really in the last number of days, and elections coming up, does nature feature in that, and can we do anything to help?
I think it's a good question there. I wonder if we can reframe it slightly as, does nature feature enough? So nature does feature. There's a high level commitment there. I think an unwavering commitment is how it's described to biodiversity. So that's got to be positive. There are various measures like the Green Jobs Fund and so on, which obviously could help kickstart a nature-based economy. But I think what we'd like to see, what we need to see in order to halt and ultimately begin to reverse the decline in biodiversity is proper targets, investment, actual commitments to really accelerate action. And we have got some opportunities coming up to do that. So I mentioned a couple of those earlier on. I won't repeat those, but I'd also add things like the new land use partnerships and as well as the infrastructure investment plan, climate change update, and so on.
Thanks. And there'll be some other things that link into government in a bit, but there's another one here that I'll maybe ask Sarah about, which is to do with grouse moors and raptors. Richard Scrimshaw is asking, what's your view of the lack of action being taken by any government, let alone the Scottish Parliament, in protecting raptors, particularly over grouse moors? I don't know, Sarah, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think a lot of the news that we've heard all through lockdown has been really quite worrying, and some of the issues or cases that have been highlighted over that time have certainly given me a lot of concern. I would say that the way we're operating at the moment is very much looking to the review by the Grouse Moor Management Group that was commissioned by the Scottish Government, which has been referred to as the Werity Report. And that was released later than anticipated, but has come out now. And we welcomed that report, which covered a whole spectrum of things involved with grouse moor management, some of which is raptor persecution, or I think a lot of the raptor persecution we're seeing is very strongly linked to the way our moorlands are managed. And this report made a number of recommendations, which we as an organisation certainly welcomed, but I think we are still championing and campaigning for those recommendations to be turned into action, and for a better understanding about the detail of how they will play out and where the resource will come from to manage some of the suggestions that are being made in the report. So we are advocating a lot around that, and also looking at how I think it features certainly in our 11 points that we're asking, which will be discussed in some of the breakout groups later, or one of the breakout groups later. So we're trying to address it in that way, because there are other conservation organisations that are focusing specifically on the birds, RSPB being an example, obviously, and then there's the raptor study groups throughout Scotland that are focusing on this work as well. So we're trying to add our advocacy to the issue through the Werity report and asking the government for delivery on that.
Yeah, there's a lot that could be discussed about that, but there's quite a few questions that have been building up. So I'm keen to just move on through a few of those. David Ashford has asked a couple of things specifically to do with SWT connections with young people in different ways. What connections, does SWT have with youth clubs and Youth Scotland? And also was thinking about whether some of the UN statements about the right for all children to connect with nature outdoors frequently can be, we can help to get that embedded into Scottish law. But in terms of our connections with, youth groups, Karen, could you say something about that?
I can't say a lot about direct connections with youth groups, but the wildlife watch groups have been amazing in stimulating young people, and Catherine has kept that going incredibly well throughout lockdown, and set up a really good platform, actually a learning zone, which any young person can connect to, and that's going to stay there after lockdown. And I think this kind of thing is a really good direction that the Trust is moving in. And the Young Leaders is another, another organisation. They're slightly older, but they are helping to engage with younger people. So I think we're doing much more than we possibly might have been in the past, but it's looking good as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry to be romping, but I know there's a lot of different questions and a lot of areas covered, so I'm keen to just give even bite-sized opportunities to people there. And from quite earlier on in the day, there's a question really for Charlie from Ronald and Marlies McLean. Would killer whales ever attack dolphins, or are the dolphins too fast?
We do know that orca or killer whales will sometimes predate on harbour porpoises, but also some dolphin species too. It depends on basically how hungry the orca is. I think the size and mass of our bottlenose dolphins that we have around the UK, I think orca would really be struggling to actually deal with one of our big bottlenoses. But certainly some of the smaller species, maybe common dolphins, they have been seen actually in the Pentland Firth. We think hunting, I think, white-sided dolphins. There was a bit of an instance a couple of years ago during the annual Orca Watch that normally happens up at Duncansby Head, and I'm pretty sure there was pictures taken of some dolphins actually being predated on. So yes, they do. They will, and they will also, of course, hunt whales too. So yes, they will. They will. Some orca seem to specialise in fish. But others sometimes do marine mammals, and some orca will actually have a bit of both.
Yeah, it's quite amazing with the different groups, and certainly with the Pacific orcas, that you've got fish specialists and seal specialists, and amazingly, I've heard that some of the seals along the Pacific Northwest can tell what sort of group it is, orca group, they're hearing. So they really panic if they hear the ones that like a nice meal of seal, and they just chill if they hear the fish eaters going by. I heard your name mentioned actually this morning on Out of Doors by Ewan and Mark, Charlie, in relation to some of your orca, is it pictures or film that you'd taken recently? I don't know. They were mentioning you in relation to orcas anyway, but yeah.
Well, yeah, we did actually have a surprise visit from two of the West Coast orcas, January 2019, January last year. We had an absolute howling gale on the 7th of January, and two of these magnificent and now highly endangered West Coast population orcas turned up, just completely out of the blue. Well, out of the grey as it was then. It was a terrible day. It was an absolute gale force wind and mountainous seas. I managed to get a few snaps of the John Coe, W01, his ID number, and also his big pal Aquarius, W08. And it was quite a rare opportunity to see these West Coast orca, who are possibly the last of their group before they go extinct. They're seen over in the west more often, but they do occasionally foray into the Moray Firth. But it was just such a privilege to see them.
Absolutely, it always is. I mean, I very seldom do, but it's just one of those creatures that's got that je ne sais quoi about it, which relates actually, I don't want to hog it because there is a question that's directed to me from very early on, even before Out of Doors started on the radio this morning. Barry Jarvie before 6 o'clock this morning directed something for me saying no bears, no wolves, even the medium-sized lynx is gone. So it would be a good case for bringing it back very soon, and asking me, do you reckon Scottish farmers will ever allow their return? Which is a really pertinent question, because obviously at the moment we have quite a lot of conflict still to be resolved with a creature that's way less toothy and full of attitude than bears, wolves or lynx. So with, you know, the aspects of beavers and Tayside especially needing to be something that, you know, needs to be sorted out over the next while. My honest feeling about bears, wolves, and bears and wolves, first off, is that that's a question, it's a social question rather than an ecological question. For wolves, there's no question that we could have them back tomorrow in terms of what wolves do and what they eat. Bears, I think, would be slightly more problematic in Scotland, but still could be here. But of course, it's a social question. And I write quite a bit in things like BBC Wildlife about the persistent conflict in Norway between sheep farmers and wolves. There's something coming out in the issue about to be coming out about that. So I just think all these things come down to social and societal questions rather than ecological ones. Lynx we could get back. I have to say on the record that one of the things that probably complicates that is the Lynx Trust, who tends to breeze in and muddy the waters about such things. But nevertheless, there's lots of other people that are trying to work together to restore, at least get the discussions about lynx. And if lynx were back tomorrow, I suspect most people, not even, including farmers, would not even know they had lynx in their area. That's what I've certainly found on the continent. So yeah, maybe one of these days our society will be set up in a way that we can get some of these things back. Lynx we should get back sooner. Bears and wolves, I really wouldn't put a bet on that in the next century, for example, here, the way that the politics is. A better kind of look and see here, sorry, I'm trying to multitask across screens here with some other questions. There was one actually I saw earlier on, which is really appropriate to, I think, all of us on the panel, but Maud was asking that she graduated in animal biology, but decided that she's decided that an academic career isn't really the thing. So are there other ways in which I can get a job in wildlife surveying? And if so, what kind of lifestyle, typical day would that entail? That's a big question. So I know, we've got some professionals here. I don't know, Sarah and Joe, would you like to say something? Maybe Sarah first.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think there are opportunities out there. I would say they're rare, and I would say they're not lucrative. So you have to accept that that's the lifestyle you will live. And I think that's what a lot of us who've come into the environmental sector are happy to do, because we love the jobs we have. So there's opportunities through, I guess, the private sector and survey work, and you can enter a sort of ecological consultancy. Equally, you can work for one of the many environmental NGOs in Scotland or throughout the UK, and start with them in some way at building up your knowledge and also taking the relevant courses to be able to be a qualified surveyor for various plants and animals. And yeah, that would lead you along that path of doing a career around wildlife surveying.
Joe, would you have any observations?
Yeah, we did a really successful project a few years ago that some of you might remember, called Experts for Nature, and it was really all about training up the sort of top flight ecologists of the future, because actually there is quite a need there. I would agree with what Sarah says, that a lot of those people then go on and work in environmental consultancies. And of course, it's important to us that those people are well trained and highly skilled. I think I would probably suggest casting the net, a little bit wider and thinking about all of the other jobs in conservation, which are maybe not wildlife surveying, but are directly related to that. And I mean, there's a huge range. I mean, one interesting example, we've recently employed an ecologist who's working on our Living Landscapes project in Edinburgh, and she's actually based at the council offices in normal times when those offices are not closed, and she's helping the City of Edinburgh Council to develop an ecological coherence plan for the city. So what that means in practice is looking at all of the green spaces, how they can be better connected, how they can be improved in terms of quality for biodiversity, and obviously that means improvements for people as well. So I would say cast the net wide, and by all means get in touch with us after this and find out a little bit more, because it's such it's a fascinating, amazing sector to work in, and there's lots of amazing people. And because of what Sarah said, which is that people are not drawn to conservation because of the money, there's also a huge amount of passion as well. So absolutely do get in touch with us.
And I think maybe in terms of the widening opportunities, then including, as you mentioned, green space, and thinking of the urban domain, there's a question from Anthony Robson here. Maybe Karen could answer this one. It says, sadly, there's many examples of people intruding into territories of wildlife, but for a bit of positivity, what are some examples of wildlife returning or even coming back into the urban domain? What could be done to keep this happening? I don't know, would you have thoughts on that, Karen?
I think there are a lot of small examples of local communities starting wildlife patches. I mean, I know more about Edinburgh than other places. There are quite a lot of wildlife meadows have been planted. And as Joe just said, Donya's ecological coherence plan is helping to pull all that kind of thing together. The development is a different thing. I think developers are very difficult to talk to, and that's a nut that needs to be cracked. And there's a lot of it going on, and the whole concept of green roofs, biodiversity around buildings is something that we still haven't quite managed to somehow infiltrate into development. So it's sort of going both ways. There's a lot of groundswell, I think, but on the other, in terms of development, there's still a big nut to crack there.
This is a real daft laddie question, and it's pretty bad as chair that I'm not aware of when we're meant to stop this particular session. What's our schedule?
14:45.
40, I thought it was, yeah, because nobody was bouncing up and down there saying to, stop it now. So that's good, because, there's a good range of questions. Something here, maybe for Sarah, from Stephen Ballard, saying, what lessons were learned from the Conservation Alliance's fight to save cool links from a golf course development? And what role will SWT have in protecting and enhancing its wildlife in the future?
Yeah, I can give it a go, and I'm sure Kenny can dive in, having been intimately involved with the Cool Links campaign. It was really heartwarming, actually, that it was a success, because I think so often we felt like we failed in situations like this. And I think the lesson from that is in coming together and putting the case forward, we can make the difference for nature. It was, for us, a campaign that was, I guess, making a point nationally about the importance of these sites. So we entered into this as the Trust, wishing to sort of make a point about the importance of designated sites and the importance of saving sites like this, and that they shouldn't be undermined by development or solely focused development solely focused on an economic gain. So that's I think lessons we've learned, and what we can take away from the experience of entering into that Cool Links campaign. What we'll be doing going forward to protect and enhance the wildlife in that specific area is we operate in or very close to that area in Loch Fleet, and we certainly are keeping an eye on activities and are getting contacts from people wishing to develop the coastal path in that area and highlight the work of the Cool Links campaign and the wildlife in the area. And we're doing what we can to support that. And of course, keeping an eye on any further developments in the area and what's happening. But over to Kenny in case he wishes to add.
Well, it was just, first off, really heartening the way that the Conservation Alliance came together, and also heartening to see the amount of resources that SWT put into fighting that particular campaign. Because I was actually talking about Cool Links last night with a friend and saying, my goodness, you thought that really daft proposals like that and conflicts like that had been and done and dusted 20 years ago. So in some ways, this was old school thinking coming through and affecting us in the 21st century. And that old school thinking, sadly, applied very strongly to the particular subset of Highland Council Planning Committee that gave the go-ahead for it. So that said, I think it was heartening that the conservation bodies pulled together for this. There's a further issue, of course, in that lots of resources were expended, including SWT money and money from other bodies involved, in going right through to having Queen's Councils involved in the public inquiry. So I think for the future, part of what it raises is whether we can have seriousness at a government level about talking the talk when it comes to really conserving biodiversity, because things like this really shouldn't be happening anymore, where we have to go through a massive legal process to fight off something that's obviously damaging. Having said that, then I think because quite a lot of naturalists in the Highlands have got even more switched on about Cool and Loch Fleet than they were in the past, then basic observation and monitoring of what's going on there will increase, which is encouraging. And I know people who were enthusiastic about the place before and are even more enthusiastic about it now, just going around and looking at things like orchids and the invertebrates. We don't even know the half of it there, although that's a truism with invertebrates. So it's a site that doesn't really need much hands-on, other than, you know, get your hand lens out and hands-on maybe to tweak over a stem of something to see what the this little species is you're looking at. So it's both really encouraging the way things went in the end, but it was ridiculous that it had to get to that place in the first place. So I don't know, Joe, if you want to say anything about that either.
I would just absolutely echo that last point, Kenny. I mean, it's, you know, one of the most protected places in the planet and on the planet. And I think, you know, it is sad that so many organisations had to put so much into that to win the campaign. But obviously, thank goodness, the outcome with everybody's help was what it was.
No, thank goodness. Another dolphin one that missed before was Anne Hazelhurst. So the one for Charlie, saying, we sometimes walk on the Fife coastal path at Pittenweem and have been told there are often dolphins there, but I've never seen any. Are they there frequently?
Yes, they are. And funnily enough, pedaling right backwards to what we were talking about COVID and actually lockdown, it's been amazing the amount of people who during lockdown have been able to spend time actually watching wildlife, maybe just out their back door or front door, but sometimes even just taking their daily exercise. They've managed to look and actually report back sometimes. And yes, all down the Fife coast, we've got well-known individual dolphins that we know very well are going up and down the Fife coast, down to down to both of the big estuaries down there, the Tay and the Forth, and even beyond that. So yes, Fife, absolutely, and just keep your eyes open. If you're ever near the coast, just keep your eyes open, keep watching. If you can, stand or just sit for a while and just carefully watch what's going on. And don't look miles out to sea either. Don't look miles and miles out. Look a few yards from the actual shore. Because like basking sharks, it's quite amazing how near the bottlenose dolphins will actually come right up to maybe cliffs, right up to rocks and stuff, actually when they're foraging for food. So keep your eyes open, because Fife, great place to watch.
And in terms of keeping your eyes open, another question there again from Maud, are there any dolphin watching volunteer groups in Fife, or is that something really through the WDCS network that she should
well, we have a volunteer network called Shore Watch from WDC. There are local wildlife groups. Some of them are SWT, some of them are RSPB. There are quite a few on the go, and some of them are quite local initiatives as well. And you do have the input of some lovely local people that have maybe lived in the area for a long time, and you have their expertise and their knowledge as well. Yeah, there are established sites all around the coast where lots of people tend to gather and actually watch. Firth of Forth, Chanonry is a great one, of course. Duncansby Head, Aberdeen Harbour. You have places like this, but there are much smaller, more discreet sites actually being set up all the time as people realise what they can literally see on their doorstep.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I'm aware that, you know, we're in the closing minutes of this now, and if I could be maybe suggest something different. I think we've gone through most of the questions that have been posed. So if I could pose a question to each member of the panel in turn, maybe starting, you know, with yourself, Charlie, and we can go through looking, you know, using your crystal ball for the year ahead in terms of wildlife conservation. How do you, what would fill you with at least a reasonable degree of optimism among the general clouds of swirling despair that we've had to go through this year? What kind of gets you out of bed in the morning and motivates you and inspires you thinking of months to come about wildlife and maybe yourself in relation to wildlife? Charlie?
Hearing people that I'm meeting maybe down at Channery Point or being out and about, hearing people that have suddenly become switched on to nature, especially this year in this crazy kind of period that we're in. It's very encouraging hearing people promising, not just mentioning, but promising that they're going to do more and putting their money where their mouth is as well. It's been quite remarkable seeing some of the bad stories coming in about, you know, campers trashing the place, that kind of thing. But also there's been a lot of good stories as well. And let's not get bogged down by the bad stuff. Let's get out there and let's get encouraging people who are showing a willingness and a love of the countryside. Sometimes it's a new love of the countryside. Let's not squash that. Let's keep that going. Absolutely.
Karen, how about yourself? Oop, I think you're on mute. Can't hear.
Sorry, technology. I'd echo Charlie and also say that I think a lot of young people, and even very young people, have got much more engaged, and that's going to follow through. I think that's the important thing. They've been crawling about their gardens, digging things out, finding worms, and getting really excited by it. And I think that's a great ray of hope.
Absolutely. Maybe ask Sarah and then Joe. So Sarah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's using this enthusiasm that's been generated, I suspect, by the situation we're in, but also prior to that, this realization or accept, you know, more and more people accepting that we are in a crisis, both for biodiversity and climate. And I think what gets me out of bed in the morning about it is the opportunity that we could seize. There really is a massive opportunity just now on the back of a terrible situation, the COVID situation, to seek a green recovery. I really think that we've got to mobilize all of these people that have found that connection and help them, you know, influence the people who make the decisions and act in their own way to help do something for nature.
Great, yeah. Joe?
Thanks, Kenny. I think, you know, there was a question asked about what the positive stories are that make us believe this is worth it. And I think there are so many of them, actually. I mean, Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels is a brilliant example of wildlife coming back when we give it the chance. There are so many others. But in terms of what would make me feel optimistic this time next year, I'd come back to what I said at the beginning. There's an election happening in Scotland next year. And for all the reasons that we've discussed about coming out of this pandemic, I think we've absolutely got to see people make nature a priority in that election. And I mean, it feels particularly personal to me, because if I think about our son, who he was still at nursery when I joined the Trust just over 10 years ago, he is actually going to be a voter in that election. And it's, you know, this is a pivotal time. We talk about the importance of young people. I actually think it's got to be intergenerational. I don't think it's just about young people, but we've got to tap into that momentum. And I think if we can get everybody making nature a priority, that's what I'd like to see by this time next year.
I couldn't agree more. I think we'll probably have to draw things to a close at the moment, and I'll raise my reintroduced species mug with pleasure here, looking to the future in Scotland, and just thank all the panelists for your different contributions this afternoon. Thank all the people that have asked questions. There were many of those questions that I felt that we could have had a whole session just to explore the ins and outs of that question or that species, that sort of thing. So thanks everyone, both that I'm able to see here and the large number of people who are sitting there invisible to me, for all your contributions. It's been great fun. Thanks.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Anytime. I'll do this again, drop of a hat, anytime.
It's good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Thank you very much, Kenny, and thank you the rest of you again. Now it's time for our Trustees Awards for volunteering, which I think is another very positive, nice thing that gets me out of bed in the morning and a great thing for the future. This is also supported by the players of People's Postcode Lottery, and thank you all very much for playing the lottery. The candidates for these awards were nominated by Trust members and staff in the Trust, and selecting the winners was actually really difficult because everybody put forward was extremely well deserved. Everyone who was nominated should be very proud, and I particularly, and on behalf of everyone else at the Trust, just feel we are so lucky to have such a wealth of volunteers in our midst. We didn't really see this as a competition, but more as a chance to celebrate the work of what volunteers are doing, without whom so much of what the Trust achieves simply wouldn't be possible. So it's my great pleasure to announce the winners now. The first category is Young Volunteer, awarded to a volunteer who's made a positive difference to Scotland's wildlife at a local or national level. And this award goes to Alistair Lemon. Alistair has dedicated his entire life to the protection of Scotland's nature and wildlife, having started his marine biology degree at just 16 and continued this passion with a master's at Edinburgh Napier University. Alistair's contributions to Scotland's nature are particularly outstanding given his young age. He's Group Secretary of the Trust Stirling and Clackmannanshire local group and one of the first Scottish Wildlife Trust's young leaders. He's worked continually in the conservation sector and is an active volunteer with many wildlife organisations. Congratulations, Alistair, and I'm really sorry we can't see you moving and breathing because that would be a great delight. Next, we have our species champion. This is presented to a volunteer who's tirelessly and imaginatively championed one particular species, and you can probably guess what that species is. Peter Garson has been a red squirrel champion since the very start of Saving Scotland red squirrels. He chairs the Gatehouse Squirrel Group and founded the Red Squirrel Foundation, Red Squirrel Forum for South of Scotland. He's currently spearheading a funding application to equip all 18 squirrel network groups across South Scotland with a thermal imaging scope and trail cameras. And following his lead, other groups have now embraced Zoom for their meetings. Heartfelt thanks to Peter for his sterling work for our red squirrels. Thank you, Peter. Now we come to the Group Award. This is for a group of volunteers whose collective work has made a significant positive difference to Scotland's wildlife. Launched in 2018, the Scottish Wildlife Trust Young Leaders Network is a group of members aged 20 to 30 years old, working to engage more young people with the work of the Trust. This group of young volunteers have launched themselves into numerous activities, including creation of the Facebook group Wildlife Champions, which shares ideas and engages with new audiences, which we've been talking about as being so important. They've developed a conservation awards programme for young ecologists delivered online, climate conversation events, attended parliamentary events on behalf of the Trust, and assisted in school visits and public events. Congratulations, admirations, and thanks to all the young leaders. Finally, we come to the Lifetime Achievement Award, given to a volunteer who has demonstrated great commitment and dedication to wildlife conservation over many years. I'm very pleased indeed to announce that this award goes to Roy Sexton. Roy is one of the most dedicated ecologists within the Trust and has a true passion to conserve Scotland's wildlife. During Roy's 20 years as chair of Stirling and Clackmannanshire local group, the group has gone from strength to strength, arranging regular winter public talks, 140 of them over 20 years, carrying out practical conservation work and species monitoring programs, as well as responding to planning applications. One of Roy's most successful projects, conserving native locally rare plants, whose numbers have been declining. 3 examples are juniper, sticky catchfly and wild pansy. For each of these, he's managed to gather seed or propagate from remaining local plants and to increase numbers where the plant is declining or has disappeared. Roy has shown tireless dedication to Scotland's nature and the Stirling area in particular. He's an inspiration to countless people, both young and old, who have an interest in our natural history. Congratulations and thank you so much, Roy. And I hope I'll see you again one day in the flesh. That brings us to the end of the public-facing section of the day. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you all so much for joining and for all your contributions. It's fantastic to have had such an amazing turnout for our first ever online Members' Day. Your support is hugely appreciated, and the staff team and I look forward to seeing you all again next year, hopefully in the flesh, and many of you in some format or other throughout the year. Do keep in touch with us and with your local group for more interesting events, activities, and do continue to enjoy and help protect your amazing local biodiversity. Finally, I would just like to thank very much Nick Wright and the staff team for organising this truly brilliant event under very challenging circumstances. Thank you, Charlie, and renewed thanks to all our speakers, and particularly Charlie. Thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.
Now, members can select which special interest session they would like to join. I'm sure they'll all be fascinating, and you can jump between one and the other if you wish. So I'll leave the last word to Ruchir Shah, Director of External Affairs, who will run through the protocol for the special interest sessions. And thank you all so much for being with us.
Thank you, Karen. For our Scottish Wildlife Trust members present, we have the pleasure of inviting you to take part in one of 3 exclusive special interest sessions. You can see them on the screen now. To join one of these sessions, simply click the relevant link for the discussion that you'd like to attend. And the link and details were emailed out to you all during the last week, so you should all have these links now. The 3 sessions are Living Seas, and we've got an excellent presentation here from Dr. Sam Collin and Noel Hawkins, and also from Joanna Pica, who's our Visitor Centre Assistant Manager. The second session will be led by myself, and it focuses on the topic of Everyone a Conservationist, which is about reach, diversity and engagement. And the third session is the Scottish Conservation Finance Project and the £1 billion challenge, which Jo mentioned earlier in her presentation, and we have the opportunity to get into a bit more detail with that with Jo. So thanks again for joining us today, and I'll see some of you in my session in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Bye for now.